Hey Tarot people, it's Tuesday again, and today, if you've been following along, is the number 14 card, Temperance. And before I get into that, I am going to share a little update with you about some of the things that I've been learning as I've been going along over the last almost 3 months with Tarot Tuesdays, actually a little bit longer than that. And I haven't gone this deep in an exploration of tarot since I started studying about 25 years ago. It has been actually really kind of enlightening and refreshing to spend a week of sort of mental, contemplative energy on a single card at a time. And I had a friend ask me recently, you know, given that we have the 22 cards of the major arcana, they're basically a map of the archetypes of the cards. Couldn't I just sit down and shoot, 22 videos on a weekend and give good insight and depth insight into each of the cards? And that made me realize the kind of contemplation that I've been giving to each of these major archetypes and the kind of depth that I've been going through. And I realized that I couldn't sit down and actually shoot Tarot Tuesdays that way and put a whole bunch of stuff in the can, if you know what I mean. It really requires me, or I'm really putting it on myself, to give a lot of thought, even to the point of sort of directing or holding the archetypes in my mind as I'm going to sleep and allowing them to percolate through my dreams. Sometimes I've been waking up in the middle of the night with a realization about the meaning of a card that I hadn't thought of that way before or I hadn't articulated before. And I find this really kind of a strong reinforcement of the stuff that I've been talking about in terms of spirit guides and how our brain works, the reticular activating system, our limbic system, and the arguments that I've made in Soul Mapping, the parallel series that I'm doing on my channel. So if you haven't checked out Soul Mapping, make sure you do. Before I dive into the Temperance card and the meaning of that, I'll share with you one of those little insights that popped into my mind in the middle of the night. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'm actively growing. I'm producing regular videos. I've got a plan to carry this through well into next year. Following the major arcana, I'm going to do an exploration of the court cards, which people have lots of questions about, personality types, and then I'm going to do some stuff on numerology and a little bit maybe on Kabbalah that ties everything together. My name is Shannon Douglas. Today on Tarot Tuesdays, it's Temperance. Now, Temperance is a card that, to be honest with you, it's been one of those cards that I struggled with. I always felt like the meaning was subtle, like maybe it didn't. There are certainly cards, and you probably have this experience if you're a tarot practitioner, that really resonate with you, that you're drawn to, or that from your own karmic experience they resonate with you and have helped you, if you've studied and contemplated on them, helped you transform and integrate some of the issues related to those karmic things in your life. And Temperance for me has never been a standout card. which might explain why I appreciate the cocktail. But in a deeper meaning of temperance, so we have this notion of temperance from our Christian grammar, the monotheistic grammar of the West, that temperance is about abstaining from alcohol. It's a very superficial meaning, but the word temperance is connected to the word temper, temperament, and to temper, like that of a sword. And the way that you create strength in a sword, and I share this with people when I do readings, when I explain the meaning of the card. The strength of a sword comes from the fact that it's heated until it's near melting and glowing red hot. And then the swordsmith puts it on an anvil and beats the shit out of it, hammers it into shape. And then what does the swordsmith do? They put the sword into water to rapidly cool it, to set the temper in the sword. And so while temperament or temperance, the card, and the virtue, because it's one of the classical 4 virtues, Plato talked about this, it's regarded in many traditions of the world, in Buddhism included, as one of the necessary psychological attributes of a well-adjusted individual in society or someone moving on the path towards enlightenment. It is, it's not just about finding the middle road. It's about the polarities that one would have to experience and integrate in order to find that middle road. So a teetotaler, virtue signaler, I'm so honest and so this and so straight and narrow, may actually not be a good expression of what temperance is. Temperance comes from the trials and challenges of experience that we have in life that forges within us an internal strength that keeps us centered in our existence. Now, it's the number 14 card, and there are some numerological wheels that occur in tarot. The number 7 card is the Chariot, and if you recall from my Chariot video, and I'll pop it up here if you want to go have a look at it, there are two in the Rider-Waite Tarot. There's a black lion and a white lion. In Plato's allegory of the Chariot, a black horse and a white horse. These represent internal parts of our nature. And we get the classical devil on one shoulder, angel on the other, sort of cartoon Fred Flintstone versions of this. But we also have real life manifestations. If you've ever said to yourself today, perhaps, part of me wants to do this and part of me wants to do that. That's the expression. These are the poles that are expressed within the Chariot card at the number 7. Now, 7 plus 7 is 14, which gives you temperance, which is the forged fortitude of the integrated parts of the self through an integration process. So we can think integration in the same terms, or individuation in the same terms as Carl Jung would have described it. Now, going back into the deep past, because so many, we read in superficial tarot literature that tarot goes back to ancient Egypt, or there's influences from India, or there's influences from the Roma people, and all of that is probably true. And the archetypes of tarot painted in the cards, even though tarot's only been around since, say, the 1400s, with, someone's going to correct me on that because it might be 1500s or 1300s, doesn't really matter. The archetypes of tarot themselves are much, much older, and at some point, a wise person or wise people constellated those archetypes into an archetypal map through some process. And I think that process had to do with moving from an oral tradition environment to not a written tradition, but a set of memory tools to help people remember these archetypes and the meanings of them. So the idea of temperance we started to see in what's called the Axial Age, the age of 1,000 prophets. In Hellenistic Greece, we could say the age of the great philosophers. And that period of time was from approximately 700 BC to around 300 AD. A lot of stuff was happening with Pythagoras in Greece from a mystical standpoint. From a mathematical and numerological standpoint, around 700 BC, the great philosophers that we know of, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, in the 300s BC. Plato talked about temperance as a virtue, and there was a couple of different Greek words for temperance, and he wrote about it and talked about it in the context of a functioning city-state or a functioning society. And what was happening during this Axial Age, and it was happening all around the world, India with Buddhism coming along, in China, the Chinese philosophers like Lao Tzu, Confucius, and Zhuangzi were all trying to figure out in human evolution and in our evolutionary process, how we could live together in larger and larger groups of people. Jesus was an example of this. Love your neighbor, and do unto others as we would want done to ourselves. It's how to get along in a larger society, because previous to that, the majority of human beings had lived in tribal society, and in sort of kingdoms and fiefdoms and types of empires ruled by an authoritarian tribal leader or king, and widely spread out agrarian or nomadic herders. And these small communities functioned fairly well within their own normative frameworks, within their own social rules and structures, but they were capped at how well this system could work by the number of people in the group. And the number of people in the group social coherence and cohesion starts to break down when a group of people exceeds approximately 150. This is called the Dunbar Threshold. And the Dunbar Threshold comes from the work of a British academic in the 1990s. And he suggested that as human beings, we have a limited capacity in the number of one-on-one or one-to-one relationships that we can manage. It is somewhere between 50 and 150 people. So within small communities, it was easy to manage behavior and relationships on a one-to-one basis, but our brains simply can't manage relationships with thousands of people or tens of thousands of people or millions of people. And so while each, we'll call it the Dunbar groups or tribal groups, and clans and nations had certain protocols and social expectations, norms, values, social mores, and things like that. They started to break down, or coherence and social cohesion start to break down when people get into larger and larger groups. And so we had the rise of the city-state during the Hellenistic Age or through the Axial Age, and the decline of the broadly dispersed tribal and authoritarian, call them Aryan. The Aryan Horsemen are said to have been warriors who came down into India to take over India. Basically, these types of warrior clans and warrior tribes only functioned well up to a certain level. So as city-states were coming together, we get philosophers like Plato talking about the kinds of virtues that are required in order to maintain a stable society. And he did so more poetically and more intellectually in his writings than what we get from the Bible and from the New Testament. The New Testament, arguably, and the Gospels of Jesus gave us the outline for the rules of social coherence that the church applied and that allowed society to scale from city-state to empire to global civilization. Those basic rules of love thy neighbor as thyself, forgiveness, recognizing what's the story? The Good Samaritan. The non-Jewish person who stopped to help the Jew who'd been beaten and left for dead on the side of the road, suggesting that we need to be able to overcome the tribal boundaries and identifications that we have in order to all get along. Now, temperance from Plato's point of view had 4 characteristics, and I'm going to share them with you. The first one is quietness. The second one, modesty. The third one is does their own business. This may translate in a number of different ways. I might say minds their own business. And the fourth is knows thyself. And the fourth one is extremely important in the respect that without self-knowledge, one can't embody the other 3. This is from what I have gathered in one of Plato's dialogues. Parmenides derived from the word that Plato used, saphrosini, which translates as self-restraint. Okay, so temperance, saphrosini, self-restraint, and self-governance, let's say, self-knowledge, self-restraint. Now there's another one, another translation or another word that corresponds more to self-discipline. And self-discipline, I might look back on the Chariot card and say that self-discipline would be required when we have a lack of integrated parts, or those polarities that we have in temperance that have been forged into an integrity have not yet occurred. So the Temperance card, and another thing is the image, the icon of the Temperance card in tarot, pouring water from one vessel to another, is not unique to tarot. It's not new to tarot. It has been used in reference to temperance for a very, very long time. So if you're reading for someone and the Temperance card comes up, there is a lot of depth to this, as I have hopefully shared with you today. Another modern sort of interpretation of these four different aspects of temperance. Forgiveness is one. I'm going to run through the four, and then I'm going to come back to forgiveness. So humility is another. Prudence and self-regulation. Forgiveness, you can imagine. Forgiveness is the release of energy that we enact internally when we let go of a trespass against us, let's say. Forgiveness is not about the other person. Forgiveness is about the energy that we have associated with the other person or the life event or trauma that we have, and the release of that energy that we have from that set of events or that relationship. And it is to, if we carry around trauma or anger or unresolved issues within ourselves, it binds our energy within the self, and it enacts a kind of one of those polarities. So we're holding on to negative energy within ourselves, and we haven't tempered it with its opposite, which either integrates the trauma into acceptance or releases the energy completely through the process of forgiveness. And we get a clean internal line or clean internal sense around a particular issue, and we don't carry that around with ourselves. The challenge with the unforgiven is that we're walking around with anger or contempt or any of those negative emotions that apply on the other side of these scales. Now, at the 14 card, this is another interesting thing that I've come to piece together with the major arcana as I've been exploring this over the weeks. The number 14 card follows a couple of important cards. The Justice card, which is Mayat, the balance of the heart within the individual, our self-knowledge, to the extent that we know deep down inside when we go out of alignment. There's a part of us, the Egyptians represented this as the heart, there's a part of us that knows when we're untruthful. We register when we are doing something that hurts another person or that takes energy from another person. No matter what, there's a part of us that recognizes this, and we feel it. And one of the admonishments of Dr. Jordan Peterson in his 12 Rules for Life is that we should endeavor to speak the truth. And when he talks about this and unpacks it, he observes as a clinical psychologist that when we tell a lie, we undermine our own power, and deep down we know it. And he describes this as a process or a behavior that makes us weak. So we have this integrative process of coming to terms with our own heart and our own balance in the Justice card. Then we have the Hanged Man card, the number 12, which is about principle and owning our truth in spite of what's going on in the world outside and taking a stand for things. We have this notion of martyrdom. So the self-knowledge that comes with the truth of the heart may lead to circumstances where we have to express leadership within an environment in spite of the fear of doing so, in spite of the social repercussions or the environmental repercussions that may be resultant from this behavior. Then we have the number 13 card of death. And death is this big transformation. So all of these things, all of these steps that we've gone through coming up to the notion of temperance have been part of that hammer and tong and cold water process that we go through. Heating that sword up to red hot, near melting, hammering it into shape, going through these transformative experiences, putting this into water to set the temper, to build the internal strength within the individual. This has been a fascinating journey for me. I'm, as you know, 2/3 of the way through the major arcana. Looking back on my videos, there's a couple I'm going to redo in the early ones because I addressed broader archetypal themes in masculine and feminine. So as I come to the end of the major arcana, I'm going to loop back and I'm going to do a couple of specific videos, one specifically on the Fool, the magician, the priestess, empress, and emperor as we go. That is Tarot Tuesday for today, topic of temperance. Make sure you like and subscribe. Hit the bell or put a note on your calendar that every Tuesday I put out a video. Next week I'm going to be exploring another one of the scary cards of the deck, which I've touched on before, and that is the Devil, the number 15. My name is Shannon Douglas. I'm the author of the forthcoming book, Chasing Quicksilver. Again, hit that bell for notifications as that progresses. And stay tuned for Tarot Tuesdays. Check out Soul Mapping as well, where I explore much larger themes than this one specific symbolic set we know as tarot. And I cover off bigger, more global issues and models in the mythological frameworks of human beings, of our soul, of our psyche, and of our human nature.